We got the man. New Iowa men's basketball coach Ben McCollum joins us today.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, it is an exciting one today as we've been waiting, and now we have the opportunity to hear from Ben McCollum. No, not at a press conference, a conversation with Coach McCollum that I had earlier today on the radio side of things. So excited to be able to bring that for you here today. And first conversation with Coach McCollum. For everydayers, you know the story. Ben McCollum and me, same age. That's maybe some of the excitement level for me personally about him as a coach. When he knocked, I thought, the press conference out of the park, he tapped into a lot of things that excite me, and a lot of things that I remember, and the memories that I pass along, and I talk about a lot here about what Iowa basketball is. Look, I've been doing this on Locked On Hawkeyes for a number of years now. I've been in the media space for over 2 decades and hosting a daily sports radio show, talking Hawkeyes seemingly every single day for the better part of now 22 years. I know the ins and outs. I know the highs and lows of Hawkeye athletics as a fan and also on the media side. And I think you'll find this conversation is one that you'll get to find a little bit more about his personality, something that I wondered about, but also some of his basketball acumen, what makes things click. And we will get into that with Ben McCollum. Also going to talk some football today as spring practice is here and everything calendar-wise has been pushed back a little bit because of what's happening with the men's basketball program. That has changed kind of the way that we talk about things and the way that we evaluate spring football. But we're going to get into that a little bit more, a little bit later on here in the show today before that, after that conversation with Coach McCollum. But we begin today's program with a look at the transfer portal. And it's always evolving. It's always changing. There is a lot of rumors, rumblings, a lot happening right now as we are in a dead period. And the dead period as it pertains to bringing guys on campus, letting them see the campus, official visits, even unofficial visits are not allowed. Now, that also does not say that players on their own cannot visit a campus. They're allowed to do that if they want to go that route. They just don't get the compensation in order to make that happen. So there are things that are happening, and there are a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. And that's what we continue to hear, murmurs about potentially a high school prospect making a commitment, that we're going to find out more information probably throughout this weekend. Guys coming in, visits. And, as I went through, and if you missed the program yesterday, you can go back and we talked about a number of the transfer candidates for Iowa basketball. Honor Huff, a 5-foot shooting guard from Chattanooga, lightning quick release, a guy that can fill it up from the outside, but also has been able to do things as a guard. And thinking of him and Sturts playing together. We talked about a couple of Drake former commitments at the high school ranks that are seniors finishing up their high school career. Tate Sage, potential him, 6'7" 2 guard, maybe a small forward type. That was a Drake commit. Potential there. And a few other candidates that are out there. Big man from Grand Canyon in Duke Brennan, Wes Enos from out of Lincoln University, a D2 kid, Tayshawn Comer from Evansville, and Trevin Urach from West Des Moines Valley. So those are some of the names that we mentioned in the past, but there is more there. And one name that I didn't bring up, and I don't know why he was on the list, and I just glossed over it apparently, was Brennan Housen from Kansas State. So Housen's a guy that they've been involved with. He was one of the earlier phone calls that Coach McCollum made. This is a guy that began his career at Villanova, played 2 seasons at Villanova before transferring this past season to Kansas State. He is an elite level shooter, and that's where you start the conversation. That is what he is, a shooter. This is not a guy that's going to be the combo guard. He's not going to be a guy that is going to be even probably a backup point guard. He's a shooting guard. That's what he is, but he is an elite shooter. And as Coach McCollum has talked about, this is what he is looking for. When they get to the level they want to do, when they hit that apex of a program and putting it all together, they want to have shooters all over the floor. This guy can fill it up. 43% as a freshman. Sophomore year, he shoots 38% from three with the volume going up. And then this past season, in his junior campaign at Kansas State, 93 pointers on the year, 90 of 232, 38.8% from behind the arc. 6'4", decent size, decent defender. Looking at some of the analytical numbers for him, not elite by any means, but going to go into a system I think that's going to help. Plus, he had a monster game against Iowa State. And, well, that's something that rings a little bit true as K-State pulled one of the bigger upsets of the year at that time, a double-digit underdog, and went into Ames and got the victory. And Brendan Housen was a big part of that one. Some other news that is also happening at the basketball program. And as all these new assistants have come in, we've heard the names. We talked about Sash, obviously his connections with his brother Tyler Sash, playing for the University of Iowa. Hearing him, you can tell just how joyous he is to be a part of the Hawkeye family. But the latest that they got is probably the biggest, and it's Luke Barnwell. Luke Barnwell is a guy that has deep connections in the prep scene. He has deep connections in the AAU circuit. So he ran Sunrise Academy for a number of years, but most importantly here recently, he was at Texas Tech. This is a guy with connections that is recruited at the Power 5 level. And when you see, this is what I always like to look at. If you see a fan base that's incredibly upset when a assistant coach leaves, you normally know that you get a good one. Now, it's not always going to happen that way, but seeing the message board, seeing social media, Twitter, Blue Sky, the Texas Tech fans were not pleased that Luke Barnwell was leaving. And in fact, we're going to talk to Coach McCollum a little bit about that. Getting a guy that has been doing it the last couple of years at the Power Conference level. Now, Texas Tech's got money. And as we found out today, JT Toppin apparently getting $4 million to stay at Texas Tech to complete his eligibility next season. That was an eye-opener. They got different kind of money than certainly is going on at Iowa right now. But still, to be able to win the recruiting battles, and you look at this Texas Tech roster, you look at some of the guys that they brought in, and Barnwell was a big part of that. This is a coup. This is a big deal for Iowa to be able to bring him in, and Coach McCollum to bring a guy with these kind of accolades in. Certainly a lot of excitement there about that, and excitement about what this is going to do, generating, building those relationships and getting it going. So just a couple of notes. One final note also before we talk with Coach McCollum is Carter Kingsbury. He has entered the transfer portal. Remember, he was initially a walk-on coming in from Nebraska and decided they had an open scholarship, so awarded that to him this past season. Now, with a guy like that, remember, we're talking about full roster spots. It's hard to create a lot of angst. Yeah, he's got the name. He's got the bloodlines, right? We saw Carter out there. He was a try-hard kid. I mean, he was doing everything possible that he could physically in order to make it work, but we know just behind the eight ball, right? It was not at the same level of some of the other guys. And Coach McCollum, again, you're looking to make change, real change in this program. These kind of things are going to happen. This is not a knock on the Kingsbury family. You just have to let the coach do his thing. And if it's right now, if he believes that even a guy that is well down the bench and is a walk-on, but it's better for him to move on at the program, you have to accept that. And that's where I am right now, giving Coach McCollum the benefit of the doubt. Let's talk to the coach. We continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Ben McCollum, the new basketball coach, joins us. Stay right there as we continue in a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by GameTime. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching that last-minute MLB showdown or soaking up the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until I found GameTime. GameTime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer. And with their all-in pricing, you can see total costs up front. No more surprise fees at checkout. I love using GameTime. Here's why. You can save big money. How about those last-minute deals? Doing that last minute, I love to jump in at that last minute, see if I can get those great deals, and you can do it not just for sports, but concerts, comedy, and theater. Plus, you can save big with their zone deals. Plus, peace of mind. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and the lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. And their lowest price guarantee means I never have to worry about overpaying. I used Game Time to get into a Twins playoff game a couple of years ago. Day before, got the tickets and we were ready to go. And you can do the same. Well, maybe not with the Twins, but you can do the same on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Let's get to the new head basketball coach, men's basketball coach at the University of Iowa. He's Ben McCollum. Ben, Trent Condon, my name is Ken Miller. Good to talk to you, Coach. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Good. You're finding that 24 hours in a day is enough as you get started over there? Pretty busy, I'm guessing.
No, I don't even remember what day it is.
Yeah.
So no, we're rolling right along. We're making some progress, and just kind of fighting for this thing. And but it's been a fun transition so far.
Absolutely. Well, you said transition, so let me go there before. Was there a time, early in your the Drake era, you were Northwest Missouri State? How important, I guess, was the South Carolina weekend when you proved to everybody? I think you got the country's attention that look what Drake's doing over there and the style of basketball that they're playing. Was there a part that kind of gave you a little bit of confidence that what you're doing over there can work at this level when you went and you beat a Miami, likewise a Vanderbilt, and then got to December and you go to Manhattan, Kansas, and beat K-State? How much confidence did that give you that, your system's going to work at that level?
Yeah, I think early in the season we actually scrimmaged Texas Tech, and so we knew at that point that, man, we might be pretty good. I always had a good deal of confidence. I think the biggest thing was how much of a difference is the level between Division II and the mid-major level, and at that point playing high majors, how much of a difference is there? And we realized that winning at that level still. You have to be tough. You have to be connected. You have to serve each other. All those things still mattered. And I think that just validated that for us. I don't necessarily think it gave us any more confidence, maybe my players a little bit, but for me, we knew that we had the right recipe. It's just a matter of making sure, that we did it consistently. And so it didn't give me any more confidence. It probably just validated what we were doing a little bit.
So just today, it was officially announced your fourth assistant coach of your crew coming with you, Luke Barnwell. You mentioned Texas Tech, and we know your connection to Coach McCaslin there. So you're able to take one away from him, huh? Taking your buddy away. And tell us a little bit about Luke Barnwell and one more spot available in that assistant coaching ranks?
Yeah, no. So Luke worked for me no, he didn't work for me. I'm sorry. He played for me for a year when I was at Emporia State as an assistant, and then he took over at Sunrise, who had, Grady Dick and, just had a ton of players, NBA players, and did a great job of building Sunrise up. And then obviously went to Texas Tech, and, partly because me and Grant are good friends is part of the reason he went down there. So, then we're fortunate enough to get him back. And, I think he's one that has a unique skill set in that he's recruited at this level. He's recruited pros, and hopefully he can continue to do that here. But he's a great addition for us, and love being around him. So he'll be great.
Speaking of getting back, and I don't have to remind you, because I'm guessing as a kid you would crack the Iowa City Press-Citizen when it showed up in the mornings, and you look at the box score and you'd see at the very bottom 15,500 night after night after night at Carver. Getting the men's basketball fans back in the building. Obviously, you've got to build your staff, you've got to build your roster. Those two things come with starting a new job, but you've got another level to this, Coach, and that's trying to bring back those basketball fans that are out there because you grew up with them and watched the building filled. How do you go about doing that? Shaking hands, getting out there, is that going to be a big part of your, quote, off season?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting out obviously, yeah, that's a big deal. Making sure that we get out and connect with the fans, and hopefully they can connect with the type of players that we're recruiting. I think the other part of that is winning basketball games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to be able to win games consistently. That's a big deal. But we also have to understand that we want to build this together with the fans. And so, you know, part of it is, hey, I think, you know, Hawkeyes and the fan base, we want to be one of the best in the country. You have to be one of the best in the country at all times. And we want their help to be able to build this and flip it to a direction where we're winning games consistently and having big crowds and making it an awesome atmosphere to play in and making all of Iowa proud. So, you know, I think, you know, we'd like to do it hand in hand with people, and hopefully we'll do that quickly, and hopefully we'll have kids that they love watching, and, you know, and then we can win some games in that process.
So going back to your opening press conference, you mentioned 3 guys, trying to get them back, and you were able to get one of them, and Cooper Koch coming back with the program. 2 guys decided, though, to move on to other athletic departments and universities. Financials, it's a different era that we're talking about. As you've taken this job and a couple of weeks in and knowing the environment of now recruiting at the Power 5 level, financially, do you believe that Iowa basketball is in a good enough space? It can always be better, I get that, but where you guys are right now as it pertains to the financials of going out and getting a roster set?
Yeah, it's much better than what it was. You know, I think, again, the numbers this year are astronomical. I mean, it's a little ridiculous, to be quite honest. I'm not sure anybody has enough money to go out and get a good roster. So it's interesting. But they've drastically improved that portion of it. I think we still got, you know, a ways to go, just like anybody. And, you know, we're going to keep trying to improve it. Keep, you know, building that NIL space and hopefully keep players around. But, you know, the way we want to build it is with a little more retention than it is going out and buying an entire roster. I think this year, just because the roster's gone, you do have to, you know, buy essentially a roster a little bit more. And so we're doing that right now, and in the process of it, you know, a lot of times if you get 1 or 2 really good players in basketball, it can really put you over the top. So, you know, hopefully we can get something done here shortly and get a few of those guys on our roster.
When it comes to kind of your thoughts schedule wise, when you're putting together the schedule for the next year, I'm not going to ask you about Drake and you and I. If those fit, great. If not, they don't. But how will you approach that? Do you want to test your team early in the year? You know, you're going to have to play Iowa State second weekend in December. There'll probably be a tournament opportunity at some point in November. So you'll have that, you'll play, you know, a high major, but what's your scheduling philosophy as to, you know, when you want to maybe not jump into the deep end of the pool, but kind of dip your toe in just to see what you've got here to test your guys?
I think scheduling is obviously 2 parts to it. One, you need to schedule well enough so that your net ranking is appropriate so that you can make the NCAA tournament. And then I think the second part of that is not necessarily in that order, is making sure that you schedule based off what your team needs. And so specific to this next year's team, obviously you do need to build a level of confidence. And then on top of it, make sure you help your net ranking. But, you know, sometimes it's really good to challenge and even fail if you need to. So we want to balance that next season. You know, I think in the future, I do like to schedule pretty tough games. That's what I've done at Division II quite often. And you marry that with the ability to make an NCAA tournament and build that net ranking. So it all depends on the year. I think your net ranking is important. And then obviously what your team needs from a competitive standpoint is important as well. Those are the 2 things we'll factor in.
We all have ideas, thoughts as it pertains to basketball. One thing that I am a hard and fast rule about is 2-foul participation in the first half. The previous coach and I didn't get along on that one, so I got to hear it right from the horse's mouth right before we see this for year number 1 at Iowa. Is it an automatic benching if a player gets 2 fouls in the first half?
It is not an automatic benching.
Yes.
It is with certain players that can't stop fouling.
Okay.
But with some players, I mean, I've played guys with 4 fouls with 8 minutes to go. I mean, as long as they know to not foul, we'll be okay. But some guys can't help themselves. So those guys are the ones that will be sitting next to me.
Mm-hmm. Who mentored you, Coach? Who did you look up to, as you were kind of making your way through the coaching ranks? Was there one coach out there, famous or not so famous, that, when you look back at some point and, you really got to thank so-and-so for helping you along the way? Who's that?
A guy named Steve Tapmeyer. He coached me in college, was the best coach that I've ever been around. Just from a toughness standpoint, from a culture standpoint, from a caring about kids. He's as good as there is that I've been around, and obviously mentored me and continues to mentor me, and I'd call him for advice constantly. And, he's been, meant the world. So Steve Tapmeyer, he's one of the best coaches in Division II history, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
I wanted to go another step and talk about tempo. I know it's been brought up a ton. Drake last season playing the slowest tempo in the country, the longest possession length. So I know you've said before that is not the way that you always are going to play. It's just dictating the way that it is. But in general, when you look at things like tempo, offensive system, what are we going to be looking for? What are outside of we're going to play tough, we're going to do those kind of things, the buzzwords out there? What should we look at both ends of the floor, both offensively and defensively, for people that maybe don't have the deepest of basketball acumen? Give us an overall philosophy.
Yeah, so we're going to be efficient on both ends of the floor. So offensively, we're going to be very efficient, meaning points per possession. Mm-hmm. We want to see the ball go in the basket more than we want to see it miss. So, and that will naturally set your defense, which allows you to be able to defend at a high level, which allows you to take away easy buckets. I will say this, our Drake team is considerably different than the teams I had for the previous 8 to 10 years. If you looked back, everybody's a defensive coach, and we were really good defensively at Northwest Missouri State as well. But most people would say, boy, we really need to study their offense because our efficiency numbers were off the charts. We were top 5 for, I think, 7 or 8 seasons at all levels in offense. And so it just depends on your personnel, though. I think the funny part about, from a fan's perspective is, ultimately they still want to see you win. And so I remember a few years ago, we were at Northwest Missouri State, and the NCAA, if you won a certain category, like let's say fewest turnovers, if you won that category, they'd send you these really cool plaques. Well, one year I got a plaque from the NCAA, and the plaque said most wins. And I'm like, boy, that's a hell of a plaque. So that's ultimately our goal, is to win as many games as we can. And so whatever our personnel says to do, that's what we will do from an offensive and a defensive perspective. And so some years you're going to have more shooting. You can get up and down. You can get shots a little bit quicker. Some years you'll have less shooting, so you have to adapt to that. But we're not going to play a style that doesn't fit our personnel just because we say that's the style that we play. We're going to be unique each year, and it's going to be fun to watch.
I read in Chad Leistiko's piece, to sit down with you, you'd like to add 4 or 5 more transfers to complete your roster. Perfect world. When is your roster completed, Coach?
Today. Perfect world.
Right.
I mean, boy, that would help me sleep a lot better. The portal dictates when you're done. You don't really dictate a lot of that. So I don't know. It could be as early as, it can always be as early as this weekend, and it can be as early as 2 weeks, and it can be 2 months. There's just a lot of ebbs and flows to the portal and to how these kids decide and the agents involved and et cetera. So it's tricky. It's one of those deals like you'll get done with an entire day and you'll feel like you did nothing because you're just on the phone. And then all of a sudden you get 2 commitments and you're like, oh boy, we really moved the needle. And so, I think we try to get 4 to 5 more transfers and hopefully build this roster out and see what we can do next year.
want to throw a name or a number out there for you as we let you go, Ben, and that is October 26, 2019. You took your defending national champion team to Cameron Indoor Stadium and lost it by 6 against the Dukies in an exhibition game. You remember Chris Street's final game came at Cameron. I'm not sure what kind of relationship you have with John Shire, but we got some anniversaries coming up. Is that one you got in the back pocket, and maybe you can make a phone call again to get Iowa Duke back, as they used to play quite a bit back in the 90s?
Man, I know John well. I maybe he'll come here.
Yes. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. Maybe
home and home.
Convince him to come here. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen, but I will certainly make a call just for you guys.
Well, and I get good tickets if that happens, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. As long as it's not some type of recruiting violation, right, we'll be good to go.
Yeah, it had to gut you watching Shire's Duke team the other night, as well as you let us know that you know him. Just that collapse, just unthinkable that Duke would fall the way they did.
Yeah, those are tricky. They just weren't in a lot of those situations, and when it starts to snowball on you like that, it's because to be where he's at after only 2 seasons,
remarkable,
is so impressive. The problem is when you've only head coached for 2 seasons, is you haven't had as many experiences in those situations that others have. So it's no one's fault. It's just one of those deals that happens.
Good stuff, Ben McCollum. Best of luck to you putting the roster together, and look, it moves the needle here in the winter for us. So we are on board and wishing you guys the best. Well done at Drake. It was fun to watch your team all winter long, and provided Trent and I with some terrific content, and we certainly appreciated that. Thanks, Coach. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one, guys.
You the same. Thanks. Ben McCollum, head coach of the Iowa men's basketball team, as he gets underway.
And great stuff out of Coach McCollum. Really appreciate his time as we went a lot of different levels there, and maybe a home and home series coming up with Duke. Probably not, but worth a shot at the very least. We continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes is not just basketball talk. We're going to talk some football. One glaring question for spring football as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent kind of back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. And a big thank you again to Coach McCollum joining us here today. So football talk. We're going to get into this a lot more in the rest of the week. We got plenty to talk about. We're going to be going position by position, strengths, weaknesses, concerns, elation, whatever it is. We know that the schedule this year is going to be incredibly difficult for this Hawkeye squad. Much more difficult on paper, certainly, than it was a year ago. And it's crazy that Iowa, you look at the schedule and you say, on a year where you miss Ohio State and Michigan, well, that's got to be easy. Not in today's Big Ten anymore, when you got Penn State and Oregon. And, by the way, team that made the playoff a year ago in Indiana, and an Iowa State team that played for a Big 12 championship. This thing's going to be difficult next season. We will get into that and talk a whole lot more. But I mentioned there is still one glaring question. I think it is the biggest question for Iowa football during spring football, is about the left tackle position. What we're going to see in the battle, and is there a real possibility that Trevor Lauk is going to be the game that's going to be able to jump forward and take that starting rate? Now, he was listed as the backup at the left tackle position, but when you continue to hear about him, when you hear what kind of player he has a chance to be, I don't think there's any doubt that for Iowa to feel maybe they're most comfortable, they need their big-time recruits to hit. And that was the case with Trevor Lauk. We'll see how big the gap is between him and Jack Doetzler. And maybe it is just as simple as Doetzler is the guy for this season and the next couple of years. This year, Lauk will be that swing guy, potentially a right tackle then next year if Doetzler can hold on. But you go through as deep a wide receiver room as Iowa's had in a long time. A running back position that is perfectly adequate at minimum. A lot of people believe that Kamari Moulton is going to have a breakout season. A tight end group that is good and solid and has veterans returning. And an offensive line that outside of left tackle is in good shape. Plus a quarterback room that looks so much different than what we're used to here over the last 5-6 years with Iowa football. Offensively, there are a lot of pieces in place. Yes, Mark Gronowski has to bounce back and be able to throw the football. Yes, you need to see all of those wide receivers take a step forward this year and see if Kamari Moulton can do it consistently, time in and time out, each and every game. Yes, there's still questions, but for me, the biggest one, and it's not particularly close, is left tackle. And if we find out by the end of this spring that neither of those guys are ready to be a left tackle on a good offensive team, then Iowa's got to go shopping. I know Brad Heinrich's the head of the Swarm Collective. He's out there looking for money for the men's basketball program. He might be looking for more football also if we find out they are not ready to go at left tackle. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. And thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. As your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. We'll be back with you. A lot more football talk tomorrow. Thanks again to Ben McCollum for joining us here on today's program. Your team every day. We are Locked On Hawkeyes. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.